As everyone knows, there are 3 tube stations at Heathrow Airport: Terminals 2 and 3, Terminal 4, and Terminal 5. But there's also a 4th, and that's what today's video is about. We're taking a look at Hatton Cross. Hatton Cross is one of the London Underground's newer stations. Newer is very much a relative term. It opened on the 19th of July 1975, and therefore it turns 50 this year. This video was actually made in January, but when I realised it was the anniversary I decided to hold it back. So hopefully Hatton Cross hasn't fallen into a sinkhole or anything by the time this goes live. It sits on the Piccadilly line's Heathrow extension, which runs from Hounslow West to the airport. Heathrow Airport opened in 1946. Well, there was an airfield at Heathrow long before that, but let's not overcomplicate things. 1946 was when it was transferred to the Civil Aviation Authority and when it went from a military facility to a civilian one. Whichever way you look at things, it took them a long time to get a rail connection here. Not, I hasten to add, for want of trying. Some failed schemes included a main-line rail connection from Feltham and at least 2 separate plans for monorails. London Transport had been considering a tube link since the airport had opened. Meanwhile, Heathrow was getting busier and busier. The old way of getting to the airport was to book in at an air terminal in central London, then get transported down there by bus. Or just get your chauffeur to drive you down. But by the 70s, millions of passengers were using the airport every year, and something better was needed. By this time, 2 possible schemes were vying for the government's attention. One was the main line connection from Feltham, and the other was a Piccadilly line extension from Hounslow West. Initially, London Transport had considered extending the District line instead, which until 1964 also ran to Hounslow West, and had larger trains. But they had come down in favour of the Piccadilly line on the grounds that, while it follows much of the District line route, it skips several stations and therefore provides a quicker service into central London. This route would come out shorter and cheaper than the main line connection, and could go right to the centre of the airport, and therefore this was the route the government approved in 1970. There were, initially, to be 2 stations on the extension: Heathrow Central and Hatton Cross. The line through Hounslow West would also need to be rebuilt on a new alignment, and that is why the entrance building is so far from the track these days. The line to Hatton Cross was to be constructed using the cut-and-cover method, whereby a trench is dug, track is laid, and the trench is covered over again. This had been used for the very first underground lines back in the 19th century. But in built-up central London, it was a slow, expensive, and legally complicated method of doing things. Out here, things were a lot less built up, so it made more sense. Hatton Cross was designed both as a tube and bus station. It was intended to serve 2 purposes. Firstly, to enable local residents, particularly airport workers, to be whisked from the bus to the airport itself, which it still does today. But there was a second purpose, which it never fulfilled. In 1970 there were 3 terminals, and a 4th one had been proposed. This would lie south of the others, and the idea when planning Hatton Cross was that a travelator, or people mover, would link this station with the new terminal. An alternative plan was that the tube would curve around after Heathrow Central to give Terminal 4 its own dedicated station. A third version would have seen a branch come off at Hatton Cross, which again would have given Terminal 4 a dedicated station. Hatton Cross offered the design team something entirely new. The last big tube project had been the Victoria line in the 1960s, which was heavily constrained by space, budget, and the need to fit in with existing stations. Heathrow Central would have to be completely underground, but Hatton Cross had no limits. There was nothing there, really. It was a large, empty site sitting on a crossroads. The designers could come up with something completely from scratch. Even the budget was generous, thanks to a quarter of the cost being stumped up by the Greater London Council. The architect was Sidney Hardy. He would go on to usher in a new era of quality design on the Underground in the late 70s. But for now, he took full advantage of the space to design a station without compromise. The station would have a large, above-ground building that would provide a booking hall for the tube, shelter for the bus station, and an electrical substation. There would be an overhanging roof to provide more shelter outside. The booking hall was to be spacious, to allow free movement of crowds and avoid the problems of congestion that had emerged on the Victoria line. At platform level there was to be a single island platform, again with plenty of space. The station name was to be illuminated, something planned for the Victoria line but only implemented at Pimlico. On a practical level, the station incorporates a lot of soundproofing, which you kind of need if the staff are not to be driven insane by aircraft noise. It's fair to say that the station is rather blocky, but it's not without its decorative flair. The artist William Mitchell designed a concrete frieze to go around the top of the building. The platform canopies are elegantly curved. There's a lot of use of steel and glazed tiles, and I would describe the general aesthetic at platform level as shiny. My favourite feature is the mosaics of the Speedbird on the pillars at platform level. The motif has been copied around the station entrances. The Speedbird was the emblem of Imperial Airways and was designed in 1932 by Thayer Lee Elliott, with the design being refined by my favourite sculptor, Barbara Hepworth. Imperial Airways was absorbed into the British Overseas Airways Corporation, but the Speedbird was kept, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. In 1974, BOAC was absorbed into British Airways, and they in turn kept the Speedbird until 1984. While the logo is gone, British Airways still uses the call sign Speedbird for its international flights. The Heathrow extension was opened in stages. When Hatton Cross opened in 1975, it was the terminus of the line. It had no fancy opening ceremony or anything like that. Trains just started going there in July. But it would only remain a terminus for a fairly short time. On the 16th of December 1977, the line would extend to Heathrow Central, the station that would later be renamed Terminals 1, 2 and 3, and later still just Heathrow Terminals 2 and 3. In 1984, the station at Heathrow Terminal 4 would open. The solution that was arrived at for reaching it was a combination of two ideas: the curve from Heathrow Central and the branch at Hatton Cross, forming a loop. Trains would run from Hatton Cross to Terminal 4, round the loop to Terminals 1, 2 and 3, and then back through Hatton Cross. In 2008, the arrangement changed again. Heathrow had a fifth terminal, and so a branch was built off the loop to serve it. As a result of this, trains from Hatton Cross can now go in one of two directions: to Terminal 4 and then 1, 2 and 3, or 1, 2, 3 and then 5. As a result of this, Hatton Cross has become an interchange for passengers using the airport. As of 2023, the station is on the Express Bus Superloop, although it should be pointed out that SL7, the route that serves the station, is a renumbering of the old X26. Hatton Cross is undeniably an important station in terms of its function, but it's also had a major influence on later stations. It was a return to the old sort of tube architecture, when stations were designed to stand out, to represent modernity. It wouldn't be second fiddle to an office block or slotted into an existing station. It would be a landmark in its own right, a functional and elegant transport hub designed to exceed requirements, to be prepared for anything the future might hold. As such, it would influence later projects such as the Jubilee Line extension and the Elizabeth Line. You might argue that it hasn't aged well. It doesn't allow much by way of natural light, and the brutalist surface building looks quite unfriendly from many angles. But it's a station that works, and one that stands out. As such, and as a return to bold design principles, I think it deserves more love than it gets. So, happy 50th birthday to Hatton Cross. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's concrete tale from the tube. If so, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like as ever to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the Speedbird to my aeroplane. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.